Hello, welcome to the virtual edition of our year-round screening series called Film Independent Presents. I'm Rachel Bleemer, Director of Events for Film Independent. Before we get started today, I have to give some praise to our loyal supporters. Thank you to our incredible lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Thank you to our screening partner, Vision Media, and our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. For those of you watching live today, please take advantage of the Q&A button down below to ask some questions towards the end of our discussion today. I'm honored today to introduce you to our guest moderator, President of the LA Film Critics Association, Film Week critic on NPR's KPCC, Film Fest programmer, writer, watcher, reader, traveler, mom, dog lover, and Spanish speaker. Claudia Puig, please take the floor.
Thank you, Rachel. Welcome, everyone. I'm so thrilled to have with us today the amazing team from Lost Girls, starting with Liz Garbus, who is a two-time Academy Award nominee, a two-time Emmy winner, Peabody winner, Grammy nominee, DGA nominee, BAFTA nominated director. That's a lot of awards. Lost Girls is her narrative feature debut. And actor Amy Ryan, Academy Award nominated actress and well known for her work on the big and small screen alike, as well as her Tony nominated work on stage. And she plays the ultra determined mother, Mary. And producer Anne Carey, president of production at Archer Gray, an independent film and television production company based in New York City. And we're so thrilled to have you here with us. Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to start with the most basic question, Liz. When did you first become aware of this case?
Well, I became aware of the case, it was sort of in the ether in the New York press after Shannon's body was discovered. And that was in 2011, right, Anne? Am I getting my dates right? And but I didn't pay close attention to it until I got the script of Lost Girls, which was based on Bob Kolker's incredible book. And what the book brought to the conversation was, this incredibly detailed storytelling, narrative nonfiction writing about the worlds that all these young women who had met their fates killed by this still unknown serial killer and dumped alongside Ocean Parkway. The book went into the worlds of these women, their families, everything that brought them to that place and that time. And that was what really got me interested in the story, was the worlds of these women. Of course, there was a wonderful, true crime story at the heart of it that spoke to issues in our criminal justice system, and was a great mystery. But what Bob was able to do in his book, and I think Michael Worley was able to do in his script, was communicate the humanity, the complexity of these characters and families.
Absolutely. And what was it about this case specifically that made you want to be involved in telling the story?
Like Liz and Amy, I think as a New Yorker, I was aware of the story from the press and media, and just staggered by the fact that this many women had been killed less than an hour from New York City, and it hadn't been solved yet. That just seemed like something we needed to talk about.
Absolutely. And Amy, your performance is so raw and so nuanced, and this is a really devastating role. You've played a lot of really amazing roles, but your character experiences every mother's worst nightmare. What drew you to the part, and how hard was it playing that?
Well, I was really drawn, again, like Liz and Anne have spoken about already, about that this story wasn't about the police solving the crime. It wasn't a procedural, that it was focused on these women. And that was such a refreshing splash of water in my face as I was reading this script. And that, that Mary is so flawed, so nuanced, so passionate, and determined, indefatigable. She's just like, she was everything all at once. And I don't know how she got up every morning, went to work 2 jobs, taking care of children, or her child who's not mentally well, and then lived with this, like, as you say, every parent's worst nightmare. So I just, I wanted to get behind that, try to figure that out.
You did a beautiful job. Liz, you've made so many incredible documentaries, and this is your first foray into narrative filmmaking. Why did you choose this particular project as your first one? And were there aspects that made you, that you could explore that you could not have done in a documentary here?
Yeah, definitely aspects that we could not explore in a documentary form. I mean, there had been great documentaries actually made on this case that, you know, we all studied. Amy, you know, I mean, wonderful thing for the actors was that a lot of these women were interviewed and shot. And so we had incredible material to work with. So I didn't feel that my place was, that there was the need for that. What I felt hadn't been explored and couldn't be explored in the documentary form, especially after Mary passed, was the family, this mother-daughter story, the story behind the story, as both Anne and Amy alluded to, the one that's not the true crime, you know, the procedural, the one that's about parenting, the one that's about getting by, the one that's about people judging you all the time and living with that person confronting that society. You know, that was the story that we could tell in the scripted form. And you know, why was this the first scripted feature? I mean, I don't know. I mean, there have been other projects I've been working on, and this one just grabbed me by the heart, and it was just, you know, it was as all films are, it was a, you know, it was a Sisyphean, no, it wasn't Sisyphean because we got to the top of the hill, but it was that process of pushing that boulder up the hill. But when you know, when you really want to get there, you know, which I did with this one, we did get there. And thankfully with Anne and Amy, it happened.
And did I understand that you actually met and formed, you mentioned that Mary is no longer with us, but I read somewhere that you met and formed a friendship with Mary, or you got to know her as you were working on this?
Me? No, Liz.
Oh, was it?
Liz did.
Oh, okay.
I did meet Mary during the process of, you know, working on the script with Michael Worley. And I'm very happy that happened when it did, because as you know, Mary was killed, you know, probably a year after that happened. But it was really an invaluable experience to have been with her, to have listened to her talk about what was important to her. So, you know, I'm really happy that the timeline worked out that way, that I was able to sit with her.
You talked about sort of the advantages of narrative filmmaking over, not over, but, you know, for this particular story. And one of the things that I really got from the opening is the sense of moodiness. There was a real tone to your film. The colors were sort of gray, varying shades of gray. Some of that, I guess, could be done in a documentary, but I felt like the tone and the mood were such an important part of the film. Was that one of the advantages that you had?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, a sense of place was so important in this film. I mean, we had 3 major locations. You know, we had Oak Beach, where Shannon went missing and where Mary's returning to try to solve this mystery of what happened to her daughter that last night. There's Ellenville, where Mary works, which is an upstate New York town where, you know, jobs have dried up, the plants have closed. You know, that's the communities that our characters are coming from tell a lot of the story, do a lot of the heavy lifting. And I guess the third location would be the sort of the where the police were. No, actually, you know, I think the third principal emotional location was the motel where the women gathered. And all of those wanted to have their kind of own looks and feels. The motel was actually this place of rebuilding and rebirth, that the women were connecting and able to, able to sort of heal their wounds somewhat by forming this community. Not heal in the sense of closure, but heal in the sense of belonging. And then, you know, Ellenville, you know, and then Oak Beach, in terms of the sort of, you talked about the grays. I mean, it's this really interesting location where, you know, you're on the waterfront, and it's like, you know, people might think, oh, this is like Hamptonsy real estate or whatever. But in fact, it has this like heaviness there, and everything is, you know, well, you know, when Shannon went missing and when most of our story takes place, it's in the fall or winter. And so there's, you know, the leaves are dead. There's this sense of menace. And we really wanted that to be, that community to be a real character in the film.
So much of that, all of that was so potent for me and my fellow actors. We spoke about that a lot. Like, you just show up. Liz had this really mapped out beautifully, you know, from the first lookbook submission to the actual physical locations. And it was, you show up that day and most of your work is done for you. You know, it's hard not to absorb those moods, or hiding behind the brush and the bramble or the winds coming off the beach. You know, it was very much your scene partner as well as your other actor. It was incredible.
That's amazing. And I wondered how much research you did, because your character was so vivid, so well drawn. I got a real sense of who she was. Did you meet with her, or how did you research it? How do you get into a part like that?
I did not meet Mary. She had passed away before I became part of the project. I too remembered this story in the news, but it was always kind of in the background. So a big resource was Bob Kolker's book. He really goes into great detail about all the women and even how they feel about each other, which is good to know. And I watched videos of Mary. I tried to get her voice, but I realized I'm not a smoker and she was, and I just couldn't rough it up enough to get there. And so there were lots of permissions I was giving myself to say, okay, well, that will be different. But you know, we had this wonderful costume department that everything I put on that she selected for me was just perfect. So the exterior was being built to help me, and that hair, Mary was a big Stevie Nicks fan, and I just felt like this hair was her shield, and she'd hide behind it, and it was quite warm on the windy days at the beach. But again, my own outrage at the story, as I just put that into Mary's world, and I'm sure that's a fraction really of what she went through. You know, I had the luxury to go home and to a warm bed and not think about it for a little while. But I think just the outrage and the deep sadness that I had for her.
Your relationship, your character's relationship, or your relationship with Tom's and Mackenzie, some of those scenes are so powerful. The scene where she says, where she talks about how she knows how Shannon must have felt because she feels it too, and just the reaction. And she's an amazing young actress. How did you rehearse those scenes, or how was it to work with her?
Oh, Thomason is such a generous, open-hearted spirit, smart actor. You know, I used to feel so bad being so hard in front of her, but I knew it was my job. So, you know, and also we were close, but not close, because that was going to help it. You know, we kind of kept to ourselves on set a bit. But I cared for her very much. I feel very protective of both her and Una Lawrence. But she's just, her character so wonderfully to the point and with great grace that it stops Mary, and it's such a great contrast. So I loved leaning into that. To be parented by your child is
absolutely
very,
yeah. Where she says, Shannon may be gone, but I'm still here. It's like that. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really, really wonderful. Liz, I wanted to ask you about, we talked about this a little bit just off camera, about the resolution to the story is, you know, it's not like we know who the killer is. It's not a true crime story in that sense. And I wondered if there have been any developments at all in the case, or if that was A, what made you decide to end it in the way that you did with the crawl and everything else, and then B, have there been any developments?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like we were talking about before, I think that the not open-ended, but the like sort of lack of a clear resolution in storytelling has become more and more accepted by audiences with things like Serial or lots of true crime documentaries, some of which I've been involved with as well. And I think in the scripted form, it's been a little bit less, there's been more resistance to that. I mean, like, Zodiac, of course, is one of the great films about an unsolved case. And it's like one of those things that people say, but there's still no solution to it. And we are certainly one of those stories where there's not a solution. And I think, it's definitely something that Anne and I encountered taking the film out into the marketplace, that was a hurdle. And I think it was important to lean into it, actually. And because really the resolution in the case and the emotional journey that Mary goes on is in fact an emotional one, not a judicial one. And it is that journey for her to stop blaming herself and to, allow her daughter in and allow that connection to happen, and also allow this community to embrace her instead of her, sort of pushing them all away. And that was the arc for Mary. It was, of course, she was on a journey for justice, but that was almost secondary to her own psychological journey. And I think we all felt like it was important to kind of push the envelope and lean into that and insist, that in many ways that's just more interesting than finding, I mean, I worked on this film, Amy Ryan worked on it with me, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. And it's like, when we started that film, that case wasn't solved. Who did it? This like, pasty old loser guy who's now in prison is so uninteresting. Like, what was so interesting in that case were all the survivors, the writer, Michelle, like all of those people. Like, in fact, once you just find this guy, they're just like a loser. And so the really interesting things to explore were the things that Bob had documented in his book that we could then interpret. But we did have to lean into that and sort of say, this is why we want to make this film. Actually, this is why it's interesting to us.
Did you get any kinds of reactions? I mean, this film first aired, I think, in March. So were there any leads? I know a lot of times with either documentaries or podcasts, there's, people can call in, and did anything come of people having seen it? I guess I'll ask Anne that question.
There was some chatter back and forth sort of throughout the process of us doing it. I think right before the film opened, there was an announcement that they had found a new piece of evidence, and there was a lot of sort of fanfare made about this belt buckle, which it turned out that they had for some time, but were trying to, I think, show that there was some activation around the case within the Suffolk County Police Department. And then the other big thing had been the release of the 911 tape, which again, since we made the movie, has been not released to the media, but some parties involved had heard it. We haven't, partially maybe because we were, we released during the shutdown. I don't know how much that would have done. There's a new police commissioner in Suffolk County who's a woman, and she has said that she's going to be committed to trying to figure out what the truth is. And I think we hope that that'll be the case. But that's what we've got so far.
Well, one of the most painful aspects of the true story is how these women and girls were dismissed, and ostensibly because they were sex workers, or, and Mary says it's our job as mothers and sisters to make sure these girls are not forgotten. Was that an important part, Liz, in what you're trying to say about all female victims of violence? Was there?
Of course, yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, of course it was. I mean, I think that these young women who lost their lives, they were, just to repeat some lines in our script, they were sisters, they were mothers, they were college students, they were grocery worker, you know, they were all different people. You know, they were not that one thing that the media called them, sex worker. They were also that. They made money that way, you know, occasionally as well. But yeah, of course that was part of the mission, and not just them, but their families. And I think, you know, this film is about class as well as the criminal justice system and how those two things play into each other. I mean, Mary's character always, you know, walked in and, you know, felt very quickly that she didn't have the right look or the right language to be listened to and taken seriously. You know, those were the kinds of things that we were exploring in this film.
Did you spend time rehearsing beforehand? Because you have, you know, amazing actors like Amy and Gabriel Byrne and Thompson McKenzie. Was there a process in which they got to know each other and rehearsed? Amy, did you?
Yes, well, we met and read through the script, Thomas and myself at Liz's house early on, and Gabriel I've known for a long time as a friend and a fellow actor, and but we sat with Liz and Michael and would just read through the scenes and see what bumped us, and you know, before we got up on our feet. But and then and Una came in as well, right? We had some scenes, and then all the women are I mean, the beauty of staying in New York, those are all my pals. So women I've come up with in the theater scene, and we brought so much of our own, you know, just camaraderie, our history with each other. I mean, the amazing Miriam Shore and Anna Reeder, and that part felt really easy and just so wonderful because we never get to see each other at work. And that was such another exciting thing about this script, just that there were so many fantastic female roles in it, and Lola Kirk as well. So it was just heaven.
Well, speaking of fantastic female roles too, I understand that the film features all female department heads. Anne, can you tell us a bit about assembling the team and why that female presence was so important for this?
Yeah, I think we talked. I think it was driven by two things. First of all, a lot of women just responded to the script. Carrie Fix, our line producer, I think called me and said, I have to make this movie, you know, and I think there were a couple other women who reached out like that, or they got to know the story and they needed to be part of it. I don't know that we honestly set out to have all female department heads. Our cinematographer was not is a guy. Our first AD is a guy. But I think women were really drawn to the story. And so we had very strong support in the editor, the composer, costume designer, production designer, line producer, a lot of just across the production departments.
Yeah. Casting.
Just super, casting, yeah. Just super post-production supervisor. I think it was a story that women really wanted to be part of. There was a sense of sorority about that when it all got on its feet and got up and running. That was pretty terrific, I think.
I wondered about the flip side of that sorority, and Amy, you alluded to this in you know, in having to and having to be the way you were with both Thompson and Una. Sometimes it would not be the way someone would be inclined to necessarily react. Was it hard as women and maybe as mothers, particularly to work on something like this, and particularly maybe Amy for you as a you know, in that particular role?
In general, I have a pretty even time of leaving work at work and not taking it home with me. But again, I feel like with any script, and this one is a great example, when it's as potent as it is, there's no need to go to your own treasure trove of imagination and think the unimaginable of your own family, you know. And I hate to use that, you know, as an actor's trick, and I rarely do. But so I was very grateful for the right material that was already at play. You know, some days it was hard to just live in that outrage and that anger, just physically, like the amount of adrenaline coursing through my body, you know. So I, you know, would have to kind of dance it off here and there, eat a lot of candy in between. but but again, like, again, to what like Anne said, this sorority. And then also, to speak to, the friendship we have with Gabriel Byrne and Dean Winters, there was just camaraderie all around. So everyone was looking out for each other.
I do remember one particular day very early on in the process, Liz, when you and Carrie and I went out to the actual Oak Beach, because it's not that far from New York City, and we drove out on a beautiful blustery day, and we kind of got into Oak Beach just in a rental car kind of thing, and we walked through the actual neighborhood, and we walked through where we knew Shannon had been and where she had run and where the marsh was and how she had gotten there. Like, we basically retraced her final run as we understood it to be, and thinking about, it was dark, it was cold, she had no shoes on, she couldn't see anything, she was terrified. And I remember that being just one of the more staggering moments I've had on any movie ever, that we could sort of walk through there and feel that. Liz, I don't know if you remember that day, but it was so potent. Yeah.
I remember it so well. And what I think just hit all of us was how long, how long it was, like how far she had gone, how, the house that she left to the first door that she knocked on, excuse me. These were just great distances she had to cover, and the terror of that. It was really important to walk that, I think, for us.
And then even when she got to the marsh where she ended up, the distance, the desolation in the Ocean Parkway in that part of Long Island between where sort of New York City ends and Oak Beach is just, I just drove it the other day. Actually, I drive through there on the weekend. It's so desolate. It's so isolated. And these women, they drove like 100 miles from New York City or whatever, 60 miles. And so we could really feel that. That was one of the amazing things about that experience. We could literally walk in their footsteps. We could be on the highway where the women had been abandoned. We could be with the cops, Nassau County Police, who were helping us, who would say, this is where it was. And we were walking on this ground. There was a tremendous intensity to that.
And yeah, and a lot of the cops some of the cops who were there to assist us and our crew had, brothers or sisters or themselves who had worked the case.
Wow.
And so it was really, it's a really tight-knit community. And we also, we weren't able to actually shoot in the Oak Beach itself. We found a really similar feeling neighborhood in out on the North Fork of Long Island, further out. But, they didn't want us there. And one day when we were shooting some driving shots, just of Mary kind of coming and going into the actual community, when we had a state trooper there to escort us, some folks from that community came out and, kind of tried to run our stunt driver off the road. So we also, there was always this feeling like when we were walking in this community that they felt that we were intruders. And that also made us, I think, understand a little bit how Mary would have felt walking into that community. It did not want that attention.
I want to turn to audience questions. Before I do, though, quickly, I know the film you mentioned working with Robert Kolker and turning to his book a lot, and obviously the scripted as well. Can you tell me about your creative partnership with him a little bit about? Or was that mostly between your screenwriter and him?
Well, so the script, I got the script. So Michael had worked with Bob, and then I got the script. So that, Michael had already come up with this wonderful approach, which was to center on Mary's story and weave in the other characters through that one narrative through line. But we went through a bunch of drafts, and, Bob was this incredible resource. Up until delivering the film, where
Right.
with legal and questions and with an unsolved case like this, and with a police force that we are depicting warts and all, there's a lot of exposure and questions. And Bob was just such a generous partner, working alongside us, and really got us the information and resources we need to feel like we were telling a rich, true story that was really supported by his reporting.
We have a question from an audience member who says, and this is for Liz, after history of making documentaries, were there any specific unforeseen challenges in making a narrative film, or vice versa, where some things easier? And also, let me add this, he says, he thinks this is one of Amy's best performances to date and was beautifully done. Okay.
I agree, although there are many to choose from. Unforeseen challenges. Yeah, I mean, it's in production is really different. You know, the size of the crew, the toys that you have at your disposal, the control of the frame that you're able to manage and create. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just like a much bigger sandbox in terms of the control you're able to have over the frame. So, you know, what was more analogous than I expected was the editing process. You know, of course, in documentaries, you really can, you know, they say, oh, docs are made in the edit room. And I think it's true to some extent. And I imagined I would be more constrained in the edit room in scripted because of costumes and timelines and et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, you really could find that same freedom and creativity in the edit room that I've enjoyed in making docs. And, you know, I do love the edit room. So yeah, challenges are, you know, there's a much larger team, but that's also like one of the most beautiful opportunities as well. So yeah, I mean, you know, the challenges are making your days and, you know, and weather. And like we had 3 different locations for our marsh. And then, you know, the day before the shoot, they would flood. I mean, there's all kinds of, you know, crazy things and you don't know how you'll get through it. But, you know, with Anne Carey producing, somehow you do. So yeah, the challenges can be pretty big, but they're also, you know, a marker of all the opportunities that are there.
And what would you say was the biggest challenge in the course of making it, just on a production standpoint, from a production standpoint?
Well, I think as we talked about the sort of thematic decision that we were going to sort of cut the men out and push the women forward was sort of a development challenge that was it took a lot of conversations. I mean, the Netflix really trusted us with that, but you know, it was a conversation that needed to be had. So I would say on paper that was a challenge. And then I would say on the other one, it's a movie that takes place in cold night, you know, so we were in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the beach, in the middle of November, in the dark. It was just hard. Physically, I think that was hard. And then emotionally, the emotional intensity, like we talked about, we were in these places that were weighted. And so that was, I think, also hard. And then as Liz said, because it is a true story and we didn't have the cooperation of the Suffolk County Police Department stuff, we worked very closely with a lawyer who was helping us understand what our parameters were in terms of what we could, you know, just to make sure, because we wanted to push the latitude of the storytelling. We wanted to be able to say we wanted to be able to implicate that the cops had not been as good at their job as they should have been. And we worked very closely with a lawyer to see how far we could get to take it there. I would say those were the 3 things that I can think of. And then a pandemic on your opening day. Maybe that's the biggest.
You bury
We laugh about it now.
What else can we do to keep it going?
Exactly.
Liz, I have another question for you, saying you've had such a busy year, to say the least. And could you tell us what you're working on next, or will you be taking a break?
Well, the funny thing about busy years when things come out, it was actually the years before that were really busy. so in fact, you know, 2020 seemed really busy for me, but there was culmination of lots of other years of being super busy. But it was like giving, you know, birth to quintuplets. Next, I'm working on another documentary. I'm working on another scripted film that I'm, you know, working on the script for. So, you know, there's more stuff to come, but no, in fact, it was, you know, 2018 and 2019 that were the really, and maybe it's 2017 too, that were the really, really crazy years for me.
Which is good because there wasn't a pandemic then. So
That's true.
how do you, so is it something you see yourself as going back and forth between the two formats, the documentary and narrative filmmaking? Is that?
That is my dream. Yeah, definitely.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you don't find many people who do that. So that's, you're carving a kind of ground that
Yeah,
is.
well, there are the scripted filmmakers who will go back into docs sometimes, like Spike Lee or Martin Scorsese or Jonathan Demme did, and then there are the doc filmmakers who have made, scripted features and then, kind of toggle. But it's true that there's usually a less of a balance in the work, which makes sense. They're very different. It's different.
I've noticed it seems like that documentary filmmaking is offers a little bit more opportunity for women. You see so few women in, doing major Hollywood movies still. Although I guess that's maybe getting better, but has you found that to be true as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because I've been in these conversations for a long time about representation, and people always, prior to Law Girls, people say, well, isn't it great in documentaries how, there are so many more women in the director's chair, and in the Oscars, there are more, women directors being nominated in the doc category. And, it's a very cynical thing to be excited about, because that documentaries have budgets which are 1/10 or are so much smaller. And so for us to celebrate that that we've achieved parity, it's actually quite a cynical thing if you look at it that way. It's great that there are so many women in doc, and it just shows that women are amazing filmmakers, but why is it so imbalanced?
Yeah, exactly.
And the answer is money. That's the answer to that. Yeah.
People don't trust women with lots of money. But
Well, yeah.
Well, go on. No.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think it's as logical as that, right? Like they don't trust women with lots of money. I just think it's like, it's part of our system that, for the big, well-paid jobs, men dominate in those, and small, in like, different spheres, women, lower paid jobs like teaching or, like women will dominate there. And I think you just see that played out in the movie industry.
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering about, is it Terry who the Thompson played? Was that her name?
Cherie.
Oh, right. Was she, because I know she stayed very much involved with the case and she has kept the Facebook page and all that stuff. Was she someone that you turned to during the course of making it, or was she involved in any way?
We spoke to Cherie, actually, we showed her the film before it went to Sundance. And that was kind of amazing experience. And I think the best part was the conversation she had with Amy after showing it.
Oh, tell us.
Oh,
or you don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, it's she said her mom would be proud of me, and it's yeah, that broke my heart.
Oh, I can imagine that must.
But I was of course happy to have a compliment as an actor, but I was more relieved that she liked the film. She liked our representation of her and her family, and that she felt we were on her side, and and helping to keep the story alive. That's always been part of our motivation, is keep it alive, keep people interested, and maybe somebody turns up some bit of information or evidence, and there's justice and answers brought to this family.
Whatever happened to the doctor? I suddenly forgot his last name.
Dr. Hackett.
Peter Hackett.
He's in, we understand he's in Florida somewhere.
Interesting. Okay. So we have another listener or viewer who wants to ask the same question that was asked to Liz, of Amy and Anne, what you are working on now. So we'll start with Amy.
I've already cleaned out my closet. I've already made bread. I am working on convincing myself to start exercising again. That's what I'm working on. So yeah.
When you get that down, can you call me?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So, okay, the next person says the film is amazing. Congrats to you all. And to Anne and Liz, what would be your biggest advice for a young filmmaker just getting out of film school with little experience and who wants to produce and direct?
And
I would, yeah, I would say, choose, find stories that you love and believe in, because you're going to hear no a lot, and you've got to believe in them in spite of the no's. You just have to be able to believe everybody else is wrong and you're right. So pick stories that you can sustain that level of conviction about, and choose your partners well. Those would be my 2 pieces of advice. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I totally agree. You take on a film and it's like you're married to it for 3-4 years, so you better really love it. Yeah, I think also, getting out of film school, if you have a short film or a film that you can make your kind of calling card, that always helps. Working with people, taking jobs, getting to know people, getting them to trust you and believe in you.
All right, we have another question. This one's for Amy. And he says, congratulations on such a beautiful, moving performance. He says, I particularly appreciated the scenes that you shared with Gabriel Byrne. Can you talk a little about how you approach the scenes with Gabriel?
Thank you. Well, again, I think just my friendship with Gabriel, and I've worked with him on in treatment and Louder Than Bombs. So I find in general, when I have like this great advantage to working with friends and people who I've, kind of see how they move and they tick. It's a bit of a shorthand language between us. So, but Gabriel, Gabriel used to be a school teacher. And so he's always asking really great questions. And I'm very grateful to him for that, because he gets to them sometimes before I do. So he's a great partner in that way. And we have a good laugh. He's a great storyteller, so he's making me laugh along the way. You know, Sometimes it is a little tricky when you like your scene partner so much to stick it to them as much as Mary sticks it to Dormer. You know, but forge on ahead, I guess.
And the corollary or the addendum to that question was, Liz, how do you approach directing two such incredibly talented actors? Especially for this film.
Yeah, I know. What an honor. I mean, when I first met Amy, I knew that, we would just be able to talk about Mary and figure her out together, that it would be, I mean, of course, Amy's resume and prowess is intimidating, but when you sit down with her, you're just like, we're in this together, and we're gonna, figure this lady out, and I'll be there for you. And, I got your back. And also understanding her process, what was best for her in terms of how can I support her to do her best work and to make her feel, what are the rehearsal techniques that work for her? I can do it this way, tell me, and just wanting to engage in those kind of conversations. Similar with Gabriel. And Amy's absolutely right. Gabriel will ask great questions. You'll be talking through a scene at a table. We did table reads with all the characters who had big scenes together, and he'll just ask a great question, and you'll recalibrate the scene and thinking through it. So I think that working with great actors like this just gave me the chance to work with them on the script and understand the characters better and get rid of stuff that just didn't feel true.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, we have a question. How accurate is the film to the actual events?
Yeah, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
You can. That's fine.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I can, yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think
I think it's
go ahead.
very accurate. I think it's very accurate to the events, with the exception of, I think time is that, we probably, dates got probably
That's true.
compressed a little bit. And but I would say it had to be accurate to the events, because we were taking a position about, we had to be able to sort of back up what we were saying with facts, just from a sort of from a legal perspective. So I actually think it's pretty accurate, with other than the creative thing that we didn't shoot everything exactly where it was, and ages of actors might have been a little bit different, and we compressed time a little bit. All that's the sort of standard stuff I think that you do in the process of an adaptation. But I would say that's what I would say. I don't know if you would agree, Liz. Yeah.
I totally agree. And in addition to time compression, there were also some composite characters.
Yeah,
that
true.
created, like Dean Winter's character was an amalgamation of a few different police officers who we knew about. So yeah, so I think everything was certainly supportable legally, and was also like spiritually felt very
Spiritually true. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, the last question I have here is, well done to you all. Brilliant achievement. So I think that's a good note to end on. Not a question, but a comment, definitely.
We'll take it.
It is a wonderful achievement. And I saw it for the second time just yesterday, before I knew I was going to do this. And I was just as much wrapped up in it as I was the first time, which,
Thank you.
it was amazing.
Thank you.
Liz Garbus, Anne Carey, Amy Ryan, thank you so much.